Well, China now owns Lord of the Rings, and like communists, they decided to make a new entry. Being Lord of the Rings, the War of Rohan.
Rodenheim, even.
So, Aiden, what happened?
We got to the War of Rodenheim, and we watched about 30 minutes and made jokes about how it's just Fire Emblem, and it also very obviously takes after Game of Thrones. And then 30 minutes in, Connor remembered he doesn't like anime and said, let's leave, so we did. Anyway, something we did see is Watchmen 2, the second part of the Watchmen animated remake. Connor, what is the plot of Watchmen Part 2?
Watchmen Part 2 takes place where the last one left off. Silk Spectre and Owlman get in a relationship following the exile of Dr. Manhattan, the self-exile, and Night Owl teams back up with Silk Spectre to break Rorschach out of prison. The trio then find out that Ozymandias is behind the whole scheme, so they confront him at his base in the Arctic, where Ozymandias explains his plan, which is to cause a catastrophe using the powers of Dr. Manhattan, which he will frame on Dr. Manhattan and aliens. And everyone's like, a giant octopus is now in New York killing everybody, but then it dies. And then they're like, well, world peace achieved, everybody. And then everybody claps and goes home. And then Rorschach's like, I'm going to leak the info. I'm going to create something called WikiLeaks.com. I'm going to leak the information. And then, I don't know. I kind of forgot the rest of it, but I think like Hillary Clinton has him killed or something like that.
Yeah, more close.
No, I'm just kidding. Dr. Manhattan kills Rorschach. Rorschach dies, and everyone's like, well, I guess we'll keep a hush-hush on
that
this.
ends well.
But then Rorschach's journal leaks anyways to a fat dude at a news publisher. The end. So, Aiden, what did you think of Watchmen Chapter 2?
It's just as good as the first part. It's a very direct adaptation of the story. Shot for shot, every panel's accounted for. It's still well animated. The 3D animation works surprisingly well for the setting. It hits every beat that you would expect it to. If you're a fan of the comic, you're really going to like it. If you're not a fan, it's a good intro. This and part 1 together tell the whole story. There's nothing more. They put everything that was on the page in. It's a really solid, faithful adaptation. You get to watch Rorschach get turned into a fluid simulation, which is cool. And other than that, I mean, there's really not a lot to say about it because it's such a direct adaptation. And I kind of said everything I wanted to in the first part, which is it was good, it looked good, and it's a very direct adaptation. That's about all I have to say about it. Connor, what do you think of Watchmen Part 2?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think the second half of Watchmen is slightly worse than the first half. One part that looked really shitty is when they were 3D flying through the city after Night Owl and Silk Spectre hop back on the superhero horse, so to speak.
A little bit.
And they're saving people from the fire. The style didn't bode well to like close-ups of them flying around the city. It looks a little slow and choppy.
Yeah.
They didn't exactly have the money to make it super dynamic, so that shit looked a little awkward. I think that could have cooked a little longer. But mostly the animation looks good. The story is faithfully told. Zack Snyder's version is like nuclear bomb, but Ozymandias makes a giant squid monster that kills everybody.
Yep.
Blames it on fucking aliens and Dr. Manhattan. And, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty direct adaptation. I think the voice cast was still solid.
Yep.
I think the animation was still solid.
Yep.
And it is the second half of Watchmen.
It sure is.
So, I guess this video is just to report that the second half is
They didn't fuck it
consistent with the first. They didn't fuck it up. It was solid. It's probably a more faithful adaptation than Zack Snyder's weird adaptation. Not probably, it definitively is. It still has the good color scale. It still adapts Dave Gibbons' art pretty well. Alan Moore's shit is on the screen, and it is what you would hope from a Watchmen film. And I enjoyed it. So Aiden, would you recommend Watchmen?
Yep. Watch it with the first part. This is the back half of a story. Outside of that, they're both pretty good. Connor, would you recommend Watchmen Part 2?
Yeah, I definitely recommend it now. I mean, before, by only hesitation, it was half of a story. Together, it ends up being around 3 hours long, which I think is a pretty fair length for a 12 comic series being put onto the screen. And I would say if you want to get the most pure interpretation of the story, this will probably be better than the Zack Snyder films. But if you hate cartoons and animation and would just rather watch live action, I mean, the Zack Snyder adaptation is relatively fine despite numerous really baffling choices by edgelord Zack Snyder. So they did it again. They did another solid adaptation of Watchmen. This time, I would say this is much more definitive and trying to just do what Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons did.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty much a step above like when they made it a motion comic a while ago. It's a good length. I would say probably pick it up when both parts go on sale. I bought it immediately, mostly for review purposes, but
you can probably pick up both for like 15.
So Aiden, as the resident anime weeb, what do you think of do you think would you recommend actually sitting through all of China's Lord of the Rings?
I don't know. Like, it looked about on par for an anime movie. Although anime movies have seen a bit of a resurgence and higher peaks in quality with the popularity of certain series. So this does look a little worse than those. It kind of just seems like Fire Emblem. It really has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. The first 30 minutes did not impress, and I could kind of tell where it was going from second one, and it probably goes exactly as I think it would. Yeah. I just think it's weird that they keep putting shit in the Lord of the Rings when it doesn't need it. The Hobbit movies are bad. The Lord of the Rings games for the last couple of years, like Gollum, have been bad. There's like the Dwarf city building one that is apparently good, but is like very niche as far as games go.
Yeah, I mean, from the half hour we watched before I made us walk, I was like, okay, it's one nation of like 5 tribes and a king guy. It's fucking Fire Emblem.
It's
and like
Fire
there's
Emblem.
the pink hair bitch and like her brothers, which were like bright costumes people to clearly coordinate what tribe they are. And then they're like, we're all gonna fight. And then the story was predictable for the whole 30 minutes. And the animation was... It was like they used anime not as a style they genuinely thought would enhance Lord of the Rings. Because I don't think the anime style... Like, I think that you could do like an anime adaptation of Lord of the Rings. I think that would have been preferable. Kind of like our Watchmen adaptation we literally just watched and reviewed.
Yeah.
Because, like, then maybe you have a basis to make, like, an anime series. But they were like, this is Peter Jackson's... This is the 7th entry in the Peter Jackson's franchise, and it's a really generic thing. And they're like, none of this... They literally say in the opening narration, basically, like, do not check J.R.R. Tolkien's books for this shit, because it's not there. This is just some shit we made up because we wanted to slap Lord of the Rings on a cheap anime.
Showing this to J.R.R. Tolkien in like the 40s would be like going back in time and showing a little Victorian child an iPhone. You just wouldn't be able to comprehend like the fucking sexy ripped anime man with a battle axe and
a scar on his face. He's like...
I was thinking of the tall blonde one with the undercut.
Oh yeah.
Who wouldn't even be able to comprehend it.
Yeah, well also the lady is like
red-haired anime woman.
Well, she said, I don't want to marry any man, and I feel like I'm like 60% sure she probably just like kisses a chick at some point in the movie. She's a lesbo.
I don't think that's what they were going for. I think they would have had some long convoluted love story with like the blonde-haired guy with the axe or something.
I thought that was her brother.
She was trying to marry. Her cousin
She
was
had
trying to
cheap
marry her at
brothers.
the start.
Yeah, I guess.
Game of Thrones era, baby.
Yeah.
In the Game of Thrones era, anything goes.
Yeah.
Or probably with one of those sexy elf twinks.
You know
or
what?
Something.
It felt like they
Like
came
a
up
sexy
with
elf
this
twink would come and
concept.
she'd be like, "Oh my gosh."
Some weeb at Warner Brothers came up with a concept, and then they had a meeting. They sat down. They said, "Are we going to throw the Lord of the Rings skin on it, or are we doing Game of Thrones?" And George R.R. Martin was there with the Chinese investor group, and they're like, "Pitch us." And the Chinese investor group is like, "We will take a much lower percent." And they're like, "Okay, sold. Get out of here, Jr. Kick rocks, bitch."
Yeah.
Like it felt like it could have been anything, and I was like, I'm not gonna like get Trojan horsed into
I'm sure
watching this.
somewhere
I have A-list. I can just leave, you know.
I'm sure somewhere in this 2.5 hour mess, there's probably at least one good fight scene.
I'm
and I
sure
didn't
it's like
stick
a
around.
moderately okay fucking anime movie, but it's like I'm not gonna get Trojan horse into watching American weeb cheap anime
Fire
in
Emblem
the
American
theaters.
anime.
If I had paid, I probably would have stayed. But the fact that it was A-list, I was like, fuck it, I'm not wasting my Sunday afternoon to watch some generic American anime with the fucking Lord of the Rings music ripped off YouTube MP3 to listen to. And also there was one dude in the court that looked like he was rotoscoped, and it started kind of creeping me out. Like everyone else was clearly an anime character, and there was one guy that was making like constant face motions. I'm like, did they just like rotoscope this dude as like a Ralph Bakshi fucking reference? Why do you rotoscope this guy? Fucking take on me by I felt like I was watching, I don't know. I got unsettled by it, and I started doing this, which is the signal that we're walking.
first-
but usually it won't let me, but
The first
thankfully-
30 minutes are a bad first impression.
Yeah. So if you want to watch a generic anime movie that might connect more to Lord of the Rings later, but
Fire Emblem.
who fucking cares? If you want to watch a shitty Fire Emblem OVA in the theaters and pay $20 to do so, then watch this new Lord of the Rings crapper. But it's probably better than Graven, but it's not as funny. It's not nearly as funny. It seems like a boring shit in an anime that they extended to 2.5 hours to make it feel like one of the real movies, and I wasn't with it. So those are 12 or 13-minute piece on some new Warner Brothers animated movies.
Yep. The Warner Brothers animated movie spectacular.